is Troubleshooting 101. We're going to look at some of the basics of the Reach ecosystem, the development ecosystem. What are the different pieces that we need to interact with? And then how do we correct some of the errors that come up when we interact with these specific pieces? So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen and see if we have that issue here in Zoom, but I don't expect to because we've been on Zoom all morning. So the first thing that I wanted to show before we get too far into it here is like VS Code is our recommended IDE that we recommend you develop with Reach. I know that it's not absolutely required. I know some of our advanced users don't use text editors at all, and it's pretty impressive. But if you use VS Code, there is a Reach extension. So you can go to the extension section here, and you just type in Reach. You see, I've already got it in here. If I just type in Reach, you'll see this Reach IDE pop up. Okay, this is the extension, the VS Code extension that you'll need to help get some support for your Reach code. So install this piece here, and this is recommended for all users that are in VS Code that they install this piece here. Now, one of the common things that you'll see is that this requires some type of reload of your VS Code window. So maybe you're saying, oh, I have some error. I know I have the VS Code extension installed. Well, you'll come here and see it'll say reload required. You just click the reload button and it should sort of reboot your VS Code for you and correct whatever that issue is. Very rarely do you need to like uninstall and reinstall that extension. Most times it's just some sort of reboot to kind of get everything back up to speed. So that is our Reach IDE VS Code extension, and we highly recommend that you install that. Now, another key piece of Reach is Docker. So I'll come down here and I'll open up my Docker and see that I have far too many containers running. Look at all of those Reach containers, right? Docker is going to create some containerized environments for us to run our tests in, right? When I pull up my VS Code window and I'm operating inside of that MJS, that test suite right there, I'm actually allowing Docker to create this containerized environment where we simulate a blockchain inside of there, right? So that our dev net has the same functionality as your blockchain. So Docker is very important to the development of Reach applications. And what you'll see is that every time you Reach run, you'll create a new Docker container. And that's what you see here listed are all of the different Docker containers. And this means that I've done a poor job about maintaining my Docker system. So this was not intentional, as well as it's going to work for this course. This was not intentional, but this is a habit that you need to get in. Of cleaning and setting down old Docker containers. Because if you don't, you'll end up with a long list of resource-intensive containers that you're not even using, right? So we'll allow Docker to sort of run in the background, okay? We don't actually have to do anything other than say start Docker, right? There's a setting in here that'll allow you to set it, if you go in here to settings, that on startup, right here, start Docker desktop when you log in. I write a lot of Reach code, so I like mine to be running all the time. So when I log in, it's going to start Docker in the background for me, and then I'm not going to need to do much else with Docker. But as I've said, when I continue to develop applications and I keep Reach running, Reach compiling, and I do things that need to create containers, I also need to remember that I need to set those containers down. So I'll come back to my VS Code window, and let me just open up a terminal. And let's see, we have a few commands that we can use with Docker. The most important one that you're going to use frequently is /reach down. And what it's going to do is it's actually going to start to set down all of these Docker containers for me. So you'll see Reach starting to set all those down, and you'll see on my Docker window here, it's actually setting each one of these down. And we're going to go back to no containers, right? I went far too long this morning with this. I probably ran 7 or 8 different applications, and that's why I have so many of these containers listed. So it's very good practice to set your containers down. Sometimes it may happen that sort of what your system is looking at gets crossed between different containers and different Docker images. So it's good to maintain a clean system and know if you're done, you can just set it down. So see now it's going to stop. All my containers are gone. And then I come back here and Reach is done. And it showed me the image hash of every one of these that I'm trying to stop. right? And I could have correlated that to what was in my Docker, but there's really no need. The point is that you don't need it, set it down, right? And then if I go into some file here and I say reach compile, as long as I don't have any errors, see, it'll create a couple new containers here for us to actually test our system, right? And then we see that we get no failures. So now in a normal sort of application, I would say, okay, now it's a great time for me to run. So let's say export the reach connector mode, and then let's reach run. And now we'll watch it start to create more space for you to actually run your application. And now, as you're operating in the command line, you do a lot of these things when you're making small updates like reach compile, reach run, reach compile, reach run. So the point is that when you're done with that test, you should be setting that container down. It's really good practice. Like as soon as you're done with it, just run reach down and set it down, and then you're not running any unnecessary containers. And you also sort of eliminate that possibility that we're getting our wires crossed and we're looking at different images and any sort of Docker errors that go along with that. Yeah, please mute yourself if you're not asking a question. If you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself and just ask your question. That's okay. Alternatively, you can ask in the chat here, and I'll keep the chat window open. We also have the esteemed real JP Miller on the call, who's monitoring the chat with us too. Yeah, thanks, JP. So what we've run our tests now, right? We're done. I want to go back and do something else to my application. The best practice here is to say, I'm in one directory lower now, so it needs to be ..reach, but we'll say reach down. And it'll remove those containers and take us back to that place where we're not running anything unnecessarily. So this is very important. When you start to develop more reach applications, you're doing more frequently, make sure you're setting those containers down. Next. This environment that we're running in right here, and I actually have a good example that I used this morning that I can bring back up right now. So let me bring that example up for you. When we run our applications here in the command line, when I say reach run right here, I'm not connecting to any public testnet. I'm connecting to the DevNet, a private local blockchain for you to test on. It behaves the same way that a regular blockchain does, but without the need for us to connect to some public testnet infrastructure, without the need for us to go use real wallet interfaces, right? Those of you who have written a few applications know that once you get up into that stage of testing, it becomes more cumbersome to just get through one test, right? You have to, maybe it's the last thing in your application you're testing, and you have a few wallet signings that pop up in between there. And then each time you want to address just that last thing you're trying to fix, you have to go through 10 steps just to get to that one piece you're trying to fix. But if you run right here in your DevNet, that allows you to run your tests quickly and easily here in the command line. Our MJS files is that command line test suite where we do not need to connect to any test net. Docker's creating that local blockchain environment for us to test in that DevNet environment. There are 3 networks that you're concerned with as a developer in the Reach ecosystem: DevNet, testnet, and mainnet. Okay, mainnet we're familiar with, right? On Algorand, that's the Algorand mainnet. It costs real algos to transact. The things you do there are real. Testnet is that public testing environment. It allows us to move our application up to your web browser and start to test wallet interactions, start to test with real users. You can host your testnet applications and open them for public testing. Have someone come in and say, I want to test this application, and let real users test your application. DevNet is just for you, the developer. You testing this application as extensively as you need to in the quickest and sort of lowest resource kind of environment, right? We're not moving out into testnet. We don't have to go get test tokens, right? we fund our test accounts inside this MJS file, right? So we have MJS here, and let me look at this first line, number 15. We say new test account, okay? New test account is designed for you, the programmer, to use right here in your DevNet so that you don't have to go get a real user's account. You're not going to MetaMask and creating 10 different accounts so that you can test your application. That seems long and cumbersome. We use new test account right here in our local DevNet to create a new account, fund it with this amount of tokens, and then we can use that account. Now, one of the errors or warning messages you're going to see is that you cannot use new test account outside of a DevNet environment. It's not allowed. New test account is a testing tool. It's for you to easily and simply create accounts and test what those users would be doing before you move to the testnet, right? So I have here a new test account. I'm inside of this file. Let me make sure I'm in the right repository here. We'll go into Talos 1. We'll reach compile. We'll just check our RSH file, right? And then we're going to run our program, and we're going to see some warning messages. Let's make sure we've got our export, our connector mode. And let's run. And let's see what type of error warning messages we get. This should tell me many, many times over that you cannot use what we're referring to as standard library fund from faucet. Fund from faucet is being called when you use new test account. So you may see that warning and say, well, I'm not calling fund from faucet. It's being called implicitly underneath new test account. When you call new test account, it takes one argument. That one argument is an amount to fund that account with. And underneath of there, when you tell it, here's the amount to fund, Reach is calling fund from faucet to put those tokens into your new test account. So you'll see warning. Let me get back up to my warnings here. Yeah, warning, your program uses standard library.fund from faucet. And you now know that that's actually underneath new test account. So you cannot use it in anything other than Reach DevNets. And we now know that the DevNet is what's running right here locally in my command line. It's running right here for me to just do some quick, easy tests, right? It is not a sort of public testing environment where our users can come in and do things and our program handles them, right? We are automating these tests and we're running them right here in our DevNet. So this is telling you that you cannot use that outside of the DevNet. That's only allowed here. So what if now I don't want to see this? Okay, Reach, I understand that you're saying I can't use this function outside of DevNet. When I move to the next level of my application, it needs to be some other function. Get default account is the normal one that you would use. But what if now I want to tell Reach, okay, I understand, quit showing me that error message. I really want to make important or make a point here to say, you need to understand these warning messages deeply. Really understand what it's saying before you use this tool I'm about to show you. Because you do not want to use this tool and miss something important, okay? Reach puts these warnings out because they are important for you, the developer. The last thing you want to see them as like this annoyance, like, well, silence that warning, I don't want to see that. Take in what it's telling you and understand deeply before you come up and tell Reach, I get the warning, I don't want you to show me that anymore. So you'll come up here into where you're loading your standard library and you're going to give it an argument. You're going to give it an object as an argument, and you're going to tell it reach, no, warn, and then you're going to set equals y. Oh, I'm sorry, not equals, I think it's colon. Yeah, so we're going to tell Reach, hey, we know that there are some warnings here. We don't want to see them. We understand what that's about. So we'll save our file. I'll come up here and clear out my terminal and we'll run it again. So we'll clear the terminal and then we'll say Reach run. Now let's see what Reach does. Reach is going to suppress those warning messages. You've seen them a few times. Now you don't need to see them again. But to sort of reiterate my point, what you really should be taking away from that warning is that I'm not allowed to use new test account What else should I be using? Now, if you follow through the tutorials, the Reach tutorials, the rock, paper, scissors tutorial focuses on this a lot. You'll move from this new test account in your DevNet environment over to a testnet, a public testnet, where you're retrieving the user's account, right? In a real world scenario, we don't want to tell the program how many tokens are in the user's account. We want the program to fetch that information from the wallet. Give me the information from this user's real wallet, right? So we use get default account for that, right? So that is how you would suppress. So you start to develop your application and you see that your program uses fund from faucet, and you say, oh, no, it doesn't. It does, but it's being called implicitly underneath new test account. And then you need to make sure that when you move up to that next level, that you are running a different function to get the user's information. So that is new test account and your sort of reach no warn. This is not exclusive to that one warning. This will suppress all warning messages related to a specific network. So in that case, make sure that you understand what the warning message is. For example, if I go back and I go into a sort of bigger application with a lot more calls in it, and let me pull open the file and make sure that I don't have that reach no warn set. I understand that it's asking me which the warnings it's telling me, but for this purpose, I want to make sure that you understand as well. So we'll come in here and we'll say reach run. It's going to create our Docker environment. And look at all of the warning messages we're going to get here. Okay, we get that same fund from faucet warning. We get that same warning. We knew about that one, right? And let me let it finish running here. There's quite a bit that it's going to run through before I show you what some of the other errors are. But it's also going to provide a lot of good information about why you should think about designing your application differently. Again, there are a lot of special considerations in Web3. Reach controls a lot of those special considerations underneath just automatically, right? The one we like to talk a lot about is, can your contract exit with tokens in it? The answer is no. Reach contracts are not allowed to do that. It's checked automatically. But there are a lot of design decisions that you, the programmer, make that are also considering those Web3 considerations. But maybe they could be thought about a little bit differently. Maybe there's a warning message that could tell you, hey, we see you're using it this way. It's more better used this way. So let's look at what some of these advanced warning messages are going to show me. So I'll come up here past all of the warning messages, and we'll look at this one here particularly. So it says, this reach application is dangerous to run on Algorand for the following reasons. It was compiled with trustworthy maps, but maps are not trustworthy on Algorand. Because they are represented with local state, a user can delete their local state at any time by sending this clear state transaction. And then Reach will tell you the only way to use local state properly on Algorand is to ensure that a user doing this can only hurt themselves and not the entire system. This is a lot of information. If this is the first time you're seeing this, you probably need to read it 2, 3, 4 times before you really understand what it's talking about. Now, I know that this particularly is referring to a map, and a map has a key value pair, and it is assigned to one specific user. Each index, right? That key on Algorand is an address. So it stores some set of information with that address. Maybe, let's say, for example, it's the amount that the user owes us. What if it's like the user owes the application 1,000 tokens, and we've stored that inside of a map where it says address 1,000 tokens, but we're storing this in the local state of that address. That user can say clear state, and it would delete that entry from our map. We would not be able to grab that number and say, you owe us 1,000. It doesn't exist because the user can clear state with your application and say, I don't have any of that. What is the memory size of a map? How many entries can we store? This is a great question. I don't have a specific answer off the top of my head. I think there is a limit on Algorand for the number of entries you can have in a map. JP, do you remember what that is off the top of your head?
Yeah, I believe the limit is 4. It's actually 5, but you're one of those entries. And so you have spot for 4 more entries in a map in Algorand.
Yeah, and to expand on that, that will change soon. We're waiting on Algorand to make some updates to box storage, and then that number should go up. Right. So that's a little bit more about maps and how these warnings, they'll actually tell you things about your application. Right. I'm not I designed this application the best way I thought, and now I'm letting Reach show me that warning to say, well, you designed it this way, but here's a problem that may exist. And I'm using that warning to learn. I'm saying, what is the value of what Reach is trying to tell me here? And I'm taking that away. I'm not just going up there and saying, wow, look at all these warnings. I better Reach no warn this whole thing. Right? You should at least run your application a few times, understand what these warnings are and what they're telling you before you go up there and then say, Reach no warn, I don't want to see those anymore. Right? I want to be very clear about that because the warnings are very, very useful. They can teach you a lot. So don't just suppress them because they're annoying, right? Take the value they're giving you, and then when you're ready, go ahead and suppress them with that Reach no warn. The limit was 5, including you. So 4 plus 1. Yeah, 4 users and yourself. Yeah. So that is a little bit more about Reach no warn and how some of the warnings that Reach passes you are very useful for your application. There are a lot more of these warnings. This was just a nice simple one that I knew was ready right here for me to show you. As you begin to develop more complex applications, make sure that you're allowing those warnings to come to you before you're suppressing them. And you're trying to take out what is the value that Reach is trying to tell me here. So I'll go back and add my Reach no warn because I'm aware of what the errors are that Reach is trying to tell me, or the warnings that Reach is trying to tell me. And then that we're okay to move past that and go on to the next step. So the next thing I want to step up a little bit. So we've talked about our IDE. We've talked a little bit about Docker and how we can safely maintain or correctly maintain a clean Docker structure. And then we've talked a little bit about warning messages that Reach gives you. And I want to step up just a little bit higher now and talk about the pieces of a Reach application. There are 3 key pieces to most Reach applications. There is a back end, your Reach code. There's a front end. This one shows JavaScript in a command line environment, right, in a node environment. And then there's also your front end framework, your GUI framework. So if I wanted to pull open an application that has all of those pieces, I would come to one of my many, many files. Let's just continue to grow. Okay, so we'll look at a few pieces of this application where the RSH file is your Reach code. That's your backend, always going to have Reach 0.1 at the top, right? Reach backend RSH file. Your front end is going to live inside of this standard JavaScript file, index.js, right? And this is for testing on some lightning fast Ethereum layer 2 networks. I do not recommend you set your deadlines that high for layer 1. But when you start dealing with some of these layer 2 networks that have 0.5 second block times, it's important to go back and check your deadlines on Ethereum networks. A little bit of a tangent there, but I thought that was funny when I pulled openers. It's just a massive deadline there. So your JavaScript is your front end, right? This is standard JavaScript. Our course teaches JavaScript. You can use any front end language that you want. We have some students that like to use Python, some that like to use, actually mostly, it's either JavaScript or Python. But you can use other front ends if you like via the RPC server. So we've got our front end here, and we notice that we're importing a lot of stuff from React. right? This is the third key piece of your application, front end GUI. How does the user click the buttons and what colors are we showing them? All of this stuff. This is normal Web 2 stuff, right? React, we're just integrating with our Reach dApp, our full Reach dApp. So we can use any front-end framework that we like to tie all of this together, but we show React. So the three key pieces are this back-end RSH, this front-end JS file, this typical JavaScript file, and then we have our React files and our typical Web 2 helper files, right? There's an index CSS file, and then when I come down into views, you see all of the different views for your React files. All right, so these are the three key pieces of your Reach application. So if I'm launching, say this program here, if I'm saying let's run our React application and make sure we do so in the correct text. So we'll be inside of this folder, and now we can say Reach React. And I'm hoping to get a specific error here. Yay, it happened. This is the most common error that you see when you start to work with Reach. This says missing connector mode must be one of these. Now remember, Reach works with different networks. We compile down to different networks. You need to tell Reach, what network are you talking about, right? This is sort of a unique problem. We can pick different networks. So which network do you want to pick? So you need to tell it export Reach connector mode equals whichever you would actually like to run on. Now, if you set the connector mode to ETH, that is also for layer 2s. Okay, there is not a specific connector mode for each layer 2. They all run an EVM, so we just say ETH for all of those layer 2s. So the other thing you can do is actually, it says here you can adding this variable to the Reach config. That's a great idea if you're developing a lot of Reach applications, if you're using the same network. For me, as like when I do these demonstrations, I prefer to show this error and then show the export. But for you, the programmer, if it's more simple for you, you just set it inside your config file, and then you won't have to constantly say export this or which network am I looking at. So we'll say that we want to look at the Ethereum network. And now I just want to launch it. I just want to run my React tool. This is a very simple sort of React tool that comes with the Reach software package. And it will actually create your React server for you and spin everything up and get your development server, your React development server ready, and actually allow you to move to testnet. Remember 3 different networks that we're concerned about. DevNet, we already looked at. Command line happens right inside VS Code. Testnet, which we're looking at right now, is actually going to go to my browser. It's going to allow real wallet interface, real wallet usage, and it's actually going to operate on some public testnet. Now, in this case, what if I wanted to say, okay, I set it to the Ethereum network. I have we'll bring up our local host there. And we'll actually set it, and it'll ask my MetaMask, hey, are you who I think you are? We'll say yes. Now, what if I want to point at some layer 2 network, right? Ethereum layer 1, we're not going to run many applications there. I want to run on layer 2. I have my MetaMask, and it's going to pop up here, and it's going to say Talos EVM testnet. We're on Talos right now. So now, what if I want to switch? Let's do Metis, right? Stardust testnet. So it'll switch us. It'll say, here's some test tokens. And now on this side, I'll have the same thing. There's 2 different users here. I'm just simulating 2 different users. That's all I'm doing. So I'll make sure that we refresh and we're running on the network we like. And then we just run our application like normal. I like to keep this at a low number. Again, you have to go to a faucet to get these test tokens. If you start betting yourself hundreds of test tokens, you're going to be going to the faucet a lot. So I keep the number low. I set the wager. I deploy the application. And Reach is going to tell me, or I'm sorry, MetaMask is going to tell me, here's this transaction. It's occurring on the Metis Stardust testnet, and this is the amount of tokens you're going to spend. Right, and now I'll just show the other side of this. So once I get here, I can attach, and it should pop up that same wager. See, 0.05. Yeah, and that's a little hard-coded identifier I put in there. I must not have changed that one, but it's still that same 0.05, and that's what you're looking at, because now we're attaching to that specific contract. And again, we'll just pop up here and show, great, we're spending Metis tokens here. So what if then I wanted to launch another instance, right? What if I wanted to launch a different application that I have? Just make sure it is what I think it is. There's a lot of projects in here for me. So now what if I wanted to say, okay, we'll export this one also to the Ethereum network and see what it tells me. Okay, I get an error. Thankfully, because that's what I was trying to do, was get an error. So this is very common when you start to move to testnet applications. Remember, there's a React development server that's running already, right? We did this. So here we are saying the isolated network isn't set, but what you're really looking for is this error right here. Okay, it says for this React runner, I cannot create a container for that React runner. Why? There's a conflict. The container name React runner is already in use, and then it shows me the hash of which container is using it. You have to remove or rename that container to be able to use that name. So what it's really telling me is that I already have one of these running. You can't spin up another with the same name. So a part of like reading error messages is sort of parsing out what's the important information that I'm looking at here. There's a lot of words here, but only a few of them are super important for what it's actually telling you. And that would be error for React runner. I cannot create this container, right? Conflict. And then you see is already in use. And maybe I created that yesterday and like it's been running for 12 hours, or I have I've been working a lot and I forgot about that container. It'll remind you, hey, you already have one running, you can't run again. So if we would come back into here and say, okay, here's the other React server we have running. Remember, we'll set it down, and then it'll come to my Docker and it'll start tearing down all the containers, setting everything down that I've been using, including your React runner. And then we can go back to our other project and now launch that React tool. This, again, is a common error we run into when we start to really move forward our testnet applications and how frequently we're running those tests. I know personally when I run them, I'm just constantly testing things and taking it down and bringing it back up and taking it down. So we'll say here, okay, reach is down. We've closed that out. So now we can come back to where our error was. We'll clear that out because now we understand what it was about. And then we'll say reach React and see what it tells us this time. This time, it's actually going to create that React runner. You see it doing so right there. And allow you to start your development server. So if you see that error message, React runner is already in use. The fix is to set down whichever React instance, whichever development server that you have running, and then launch the one that you need to launch, right? And this is a sort of an overview of how we move from command line, how we move from that DevNet up into our testnet. And now at our testnet, we would either run extensive tests ourselves. We could host this for public testing, right? And then the next step would be to take this to mainnet, to actually move our application onto the mainnet. Now, we get a lot of questions about this because it seems like it's difficult. It seems like a big thing. Oh, I need to run this on mainnet now. Well, if we look at this import here on line 12, when I run this on the Algorand network, it's going to say, use this wallet, this MyAlgo wallet, and we want to run on testnet. That's how we run on mainnet. It'll launch, it'll pull open your MyAlgo wallet the same way, but now it's going to be talking about real tokens. It's going to be talking about real value, right? So it can be fun, especially on Algorand, to go deploy your application to mainnet. It's very cheap, right? 0.001 algos for you to do so. And you know, the next thing to be careful with is playing with real assets, right? But that's the overview sort of the three different environments that we're really dealing with. Mainnet is the goal, right? You start developing your application, you want to get to mainnet. First, you should test very robustly in your DevNet, right here inside your command line. Build out that MJS file with as many tests, as deep tests as you can really think of, right? Everything that your application needs before you move it up to the testnet. And then what you're testing is public interaction. You're testing wallet interaction. Does the wallet do what I need it to do? Is there some error that I missed, right? And after your testnet journey is complete and you're ready, then you move your application to mainnet. But we've already tested it thoroughly, both in our DevNet environment and in a more public, realistic sort of looking testnet. Before we take that same functionality and move it to mainnet. And now we can feel more comfortable spending our real tokens because we know exactly how the application is going to behave, right? We're not testing with hundreds of algos, thousands of algos that we're worried about losing. We're using those testnet tokens to handle that functionality for us. Okay, so that is like the three sort of major pieces of reach, right? We looked first at what the development ecosystem looks like, what it looks like to have your VS Code window set up with the reach extension, to be getting that support for your RSH files, right? But then also what Docker does for us, and how we can maintain our Docker environment. And again, we want to make sure that we're setting down old containers when we're done with them, right? And then we looked at a little bit higher level of what a reach application looks like. What are the environments that we are developing in? There are three different environments: your DevNet, your testnet, and your mainnet. There are some key considerations when you move from DevNet to testnet. One of them being the use of how you retrieve the user's account. We looked at new test account, and here is the testnet version of that get default account. And this is what that warning message is telling you. Hey, you can't use new test account. You need to use something else. And this will fetch the user's real account, right? And then we looked at moving that up into your testnet environment on a full React application, testing inside your web browser, actually using real testnet tokens and testing your wallet interaction with your users, right? So that's everything I have for today. So at this point, if you have any questions, feel free to either unmute yourself or drop them in the chat there, and we can take any of those. Also, if you're having like specific problems, reach out to us in Discord, post in that public channel, the help channel, general channel. Hey, Nick, I'd love to see this on Troubleshooting 101 next week. And I'll focus on that specifically and talk a lot about whatever error that is that you've encountered, and then why it happens, how we fix it, and sort of how we think about developing our apps in the future so that we don't have those errors occur. The other part is next Thursday, live coding session. It will happen in our Discord channel. I know a lot of you, especially on this call, are in that Discord channel. And the purpose here is just for it to be very loose form, right? I want you to be able to come into those sessions and say, hey, how do we do this? Or what could you show me how to build a blackjack application, a swap contract? What about maps? Can I see more about maps? And just do a very community session where I'll have my screen shared, I'll write code for you, and you just tell me what you want to see, right? Otherwise, I'll have projects that I'm working on personally, and I'd be happy to share with you how I'm working through some of the problems that I'm dealing with, how I'm thinking about the design of my application. and then some of the advanced level features that go along with that. Or we can, we can do beginner level features as well. So I don't want to isolate it just to the advanced users. So yeah, okay. Excuse me, funny. That's
Come
funny.
to the workshop tomorrow.
Yeah, that's funny. Emmanuel says, how do I build on Talos? I says, I guess I'll just have to wait till tomorrow. So that is another important point. We're doing a workshop with Talos. Reach and Talos have partnered up. And we're gonna go to the Talos Developer Network, and we're gonna show them a little bit about Reach. We're gonna show how we build Reach. We're gonna show how you build a Reach application. And then we're also going to talk a lot to new Talos developers about joining the Reach community. Yeah, it would be great if we had a lot of the Reach community there to help support. I know a lot of you are ready for that advanced level material, and that's what this workshop will cover. We'll do what is Reach, why you would use Reach, and then we'll walk into an advanced implementation of a production scale application. Some of those.
Is the Google Meet correct?
I'm
Or
not
is
sure.
it a different link?
No, it shouldn't be. It actually shouldn't be Google Meet.
Okay,
Did you pull that off of the calendar?
Yeah, we gotta fix that.
Yeah, it shouldn't be. That's not on there. Yeah, I'll post it out. We've got it in our Discord channel. I can pull it up for you right now. Yeah, okay, here it is. Here is the one that you want to use.
The live stream link, yeah.
Yeah, that'll take you and get you the RSVP for the live stream link. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry for the misinformation, folks.
Misinformation that I hear that'll cost you money now. So yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's real, I guess. Okay, thanks everybody for your time. As we move through these sessions, we'll get into more advanced topics. I really wanted to start at square one, talk about a lot of square one stuff. We'll record this, we'll post it up on our YouTube channel, and then we'll move on to what is the next conversation in Troubleshooting 101. And eventually we'll turn this into like Troubleshooting 201 or whichever you'd like to call this course. So thanks everybody for your time. I look forward to seeing you guys next week.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Nick.
thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, Nick.
Yeah, thank you.